Introducing Golden State Republican Women President Janet Price.
Well, welcome, Golden State Republican women, your friends, family, guests. We're so excited to have you join us for yet another special speaker event. And tonight is very special because we have a very special honored guest. And I know you're very excited to hear her, as am I. I want to thank our team. This doesn't come together easily. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. So I just want to thank the team that helps every single time. Our webmaster, Sherry Gillis. Thank you, Sherry, our corresponding secretary, and that is Kaylee Komatsu. And I also want to thank our two hostesses tonight. It will be Gretchen Cox, first vice president of programs, and third vice president of political campaign activities, Nancy Wofford. So I'm going to turn the evening over to Gretchen so she can introduce our special guest tonight. Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you, President Janet. It's nice to be here with everybody. Thank you all for joining us. I know there's more people still piling in, so we're looking forward to a good evening. I just wanted to mention as those of you who saw the video in the waiting room, I just wanted to remind you about our upcoming special event on October 18th at the Woodland Hills Country Club. It's the Golden State Republican Women fundraiser with special host Steve Hilton. So he will be our special speaker that night, our host. It will be emceed by Jennifer Horn. We will have a nationally renowned comedian, Robert G. Lee, and other special guests there. So we hope you will all join us that evening. It should be a really, really fun night of conversation, comedy, and camaraderie. We hope you'll all join us. Before I introduce our special guest tonight, I would like to remind you all, please turn on your mute buttons. If you have any questions, we will take those in the chat box. So look down at typically the bottom of your screen and go to your chat box when you think of a question you would like us to ask the chairwoman, and we will be sure and do our best to get to all of them. So I'm so happy to introduce Jessica Millan Patterson. She is a wife, a mother, and she is the chairman of the California Republican Party. She is the first woman, the first Latina, and the first millennial to serve as the chair, and she's known for her no-nonsense, get things done style. She was elected as the chair of the CAGOP in 2019, and her record includes picking up 5 House seats between 2020 and 2022 over back-to-back cycles that helped secure a Republican House majority in Congress. She also helped to flip 2 Assembly seats to red in 2022, and also in 2022, voters sided with the California GOP on 2/3 of the ballot initiatives on which the party took a position. So that's really showing the influence that she has created and is sustaining within our party. She has orchestrated the addition of well over 500,000 new Republicans on the voter rolls, and she's raised over 80 million, and I'm guessing that's probably an old number. I'm guessing it's more than that by now. For the party. She's also overseen the massive statewide effort to increase voter contact by nearly 100% over 2020 levels. Under her leadership, Republicans are in position for some great wins in the upcoming election. It is my pleasure to introduce California GOP Chairwoman Jessica Millan Patterson. Thanks for being with us tonight, Jessica.
And thank you so much, Gretchen, for that introduction. I know there's like a standard bio that they send out, but I always feel so, I don't know, not appropriate. Like it sounds like it's giving me all the credit for what has been done by so many. And it has really been an amazing and unified team from around the state. I see my friend Judy Reese is on, who's been working on voter registration for as long as I can remember. I know she's on the election integrity team. These are things that we have been working on together for such a long time. So I truly say thank you to all of you, because all of the successes that the California Republican Party has had are your successes. And, I just get to have the great honor of being the chairwoman. I also want to take a minute to just acknowledge the mission of the Golden State Republican Women. This is something that has been a project of mine for a very long time, in the way that you support women, and the way that you want to bring women together to make a difference. And I can't thank you enough. I know that sometimes, even in our own families, and that's what I consider the Republican Party, it's a family. There's some growing pains, and there's some times when we need to take time apart. But I think that the way that you all have tried to find ways to be productive and do the mission of the Republican Party in going out and working hard to get more people registered, turn out people to vote, and at the end of the day, get more Republicans elected. I'm just so incredibly grateful for the partnership. So thank you for the work that you have done in all of that. We have worked incredibly hard, and over the last 20 years, I was a graduate of the Marian Bergeson series. And, this was an organization that was developed to find women to be more engaged in politics, whether it was on the staff side, which is where I thought I would always be, in the elected side, the policy side. We're trying to make sure that women are engaged in the process of politics. And so I am just so incredibly proud of not only what I and we have accomplished, but the work that we have done to build up other women. Having women on my staff that are incredibly qualified, that are out there doing the absolute best job. And people commented all of the time. I'm sure many of you have met Krista Pittman, who's on our team, Ellie Hockenberry and Ashley Yanez in our communications department, Jocelyn Flores inside our digital department. We have women that are leading the charge. Katie Davis in our finance department, Danielle Richards in our HR and admin and member services department. We have women that are leading the charge all over the state of California and through California Republican Party politics. And of course, on the elected official side, getting individuals like Michelle Park Steele and Young Kim elected, this was critical. We would not have the House majority without those types of races. And so we're just incredibly proud of the work that we've done to not only get Republican women elected, but also all Republicans around the state. You guys have been a big part of that. Before I get into the targeted races, I do want to take a minute, and I was laughing at some of the photos that I saw in there. I passed by that Kamala Harris is an idiot banner the other day at Trump National, and I got to tell you, I really laughed very hard when I saw it. I was driving down the street. But California has been thrust into the light in really quite an unexpected way in the last couple of months. I mean, if you had been hearing any of my conversations since June of last year, I was always talking about the fact that Biden was not going to be their nominee. And it was pretty clear to me back then. And I wasn't sure exactly how they were going to do it. I figured that it would likely happen at convention, but it was pretty clear that he wasn't going to be our nominee. I really thought that they were going to take the route of Governor Gavin Newsom. He was out there doing his red state tour, going out, and if you'll remember correctly, they wouldn't even let Vice President Harris go out on the stump before Biden got out of the race. Her approval ratings were lower than his, and so they were sending Governor Newsom everywhere. And I really thought that that was the route that they were going to take, but instead, here we are. And nevertheless, California is now in the spotlight in a way that we did not exactly expect once they made Kamala Harris their party's nominee. So what is our job? You know, we're going to talk about what we can do to affect things here in California, but also our job is to talk about nationally what people like Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris herself have done to our Golden State. Whether it was her time as San Francisco DA, her time as Attorney General, her time as our US Senator, she has made sure that she never puts Californians first. And this is a problem that we've seen over and over again, whether it's coming down on the side of criminals, being in favor of sanctuary city and sanctuary state policies, the role that she played in Propositions 47 and 57. She was the person that said we needed to re-examine ICE as our US Senator. She is the sponsor of the Green New Deal in the Senate. We know exactly who she is because she has shown us, not in the last 3.5 years that she's been vice president, but in the last 20 years that she has been a representative here in California. So it's going to be our job to continue to educate people from around the country. The good news is they're already getting a lot of education from their new neighbors who are former Californians. We saw in 2022, 700,000 people left our state in 2022 alone. We lost a congressional district in the first time in our state's history because more people were leaving our state than coming into it. Nobody is looking at California and saying that's what we should be doing. We are on the top of all of the wrong lists. And the leadership of Kamala Harris and the policies of Kamala Harris is what has put us on the top of all of those wrong lists. All right, so let's talk a little bit about specifics here in California, because as Gretchen mentioned, we picked up 5 House seats in the last 2 cycles. What does that mean for the national picture? Well, it means that the House majority, holding on to it, comes right through California. It also means that growing the House majority comes right through California as well. We currently hold a 3-seat House majority. You do the math, 5 pickups here in California in the last 2 states. The entire country can thank Deep Blue California for a House majority. Every single time we wanted to stop what the Senate or what President Biden was trying to push through, it was the House majority that did that. And they would not have it without those California wins. So let's talk about those pickups, and then we'll talk about what we're going to be focused on come November, or we've already been focused on, really. So those 5 pickups. In 2020, we picked up 4 House seats. We hadn't picked up a single House seat and turning it from blue to red since 1994. To give you a little bit of context, I was a freshman in high school the last time we did that. And we didn't do it once, we didn't do it twice, not 3 times, we did it 4 times in that 1 year. In 2022, we finished up with redistricting, and what many said was a really tough redraw for Republicans. All of the experts and analysts said we were probably going to lose 2 of those seats. We not only held on to every single one of our incumbents, but we also picked up an open seat with Congressman John Duarte that same year. So at that point, Democrats had lost 5 seats to Republicans. But they also lost a 6th seat, and they lost that 6th seat because of redistricting and the reapportionment. We lost a seat. Places like Texas and Florida picked them up. So we're going to be very focused on making sure we protect all 5 of those House seats. All 5 of those House seats are seats that President Biden won, some by double digits. In addition to that, we added on a 6th protect seat in the last cycle. As I mentioned, the draw was a little bit more difficult for Republicans. So we added on Congressman Ken Calvert to that list as well. So now in 2024, we're protecting 6 House seats. So that's Young Kim, Michelle Park Steele, David Valadao, Mike Garcia, John Duarte, and Ken Calvert. Then we're going to go on the offense. And we have the opportunity really in 3 additional seats that we have a pathway to victory for. We just finished up a very aggressive modeling project that showed us the pathway and the voters that we need to turn out to make sure that we win. And we'll start up in the north, California 9. This is a seat that is so incredibly interesting to me. In 2022, our congressional candidate lost by about 15,000 votes there. Our candidate for controller, many of you guys know, Lanhee Chen, he won that seat by 11,000 votes. So that's a swing universe of about 25,000 people who have voted for a Republican for. We don't have a brand problem. We don't have a turnout problem. We just need to make sure they have the right candidate. We think we found that candidate in Stockton Mayor Kevin Lincoln. So this one is going to be a top priority for us. Now moving down to the south, we have Scott Baugh. This is a seat that is now the open Katie Porter seat. We thank Steve Garvey for making sure that she was retired from California politics. She's not only not going to be a congressional member of the cycle, she's also not going to be our US Senator. So we can all thank Steve Garvey for doing so incredibly well in that primary and making sure he shut her out of the general election. But this is a seat where she had $29 million to spend in the last cycle. And Scott Baugh just lost by a couple of points. He's back in there. And I'm going to talk about registration in a little bit. But this seat in particular, we are almost even on registration. And we just don't lose seats that we get to even on registration on. And then finally, just south of there in the southern part of Orange County, northern part of San Diego, we have the 11th seat. You know, this seat on registration, you would think this is a seat that Republicans can take, but it's been incredibly elusive. We've also seen a shift, particularly with Republican women in those coastal seats. So Judy, we're going to need a lot of your help there in San Diego to make sure we get Matt Gunderson across the finish line. Independents in the Valley and the inland areas and Democrats, soft Democrats, have actually been more reliable voters for us than coastal Republican women. So we're going to need to make sure we turn out every single one of them and that they're voting for our candidates. So Matt Gunderson is also a great opportunity to pick up for us. So I want to talk a little bit about how we get to this place. Well, actually, let me talk about legislative races first. And then we'll talk about how we get to the place where we can not only hold on to the House majority in California, but actually grow the House majority in California. You know, we have 3 protects on the legislative side. Josh Hoover picked up his seat. He's in the Sacramento suburbs. This is a seat that, you know, we had a 10-year incumbent Democrat in that seat. And Josh Hoover ran an absolutely flawless campaign. It is also one of the closest seats that we have on registration. So he has been doing everything he should be as a legislative member. And I think that at the end of the day, he wins the seat, but it's going to be a dogfight. We're going to be working really hard to protect that seat. Next, down in the desert area. This is landslide Greg Wallace. You know, when we talk about election integrity and curing of ballots, and I'll get to all of that in a minute when we talk infrastructure, but this is the type of seat that it makes a difference. Greg Wallace won by 85 votes in the last cycle. Most of that came from curing of ballots leading up to and during Thanksgiving weekend. So this is absolutely something that is critical. It was the tightest race in the entire state, second tightest race in the entire state. And Greg Wallace ended up on top because of those 85 votes. And then over on the coast, again in San Diego, great overlap with that Gunderson seat is Lori Davies. And, you know, this is a seat that because it's a coastal seat, the registration looks a little bit better for us there. But because it is that coastal seat, this is going to stay on our target list. Lori's been doing a fantastic job now that she's got the San Diego portion in her district. She's really been showing up. She's really been showing out. People down there don't even know she's not from San Diego. And so that helps a lot. And I think at the end of the day, she beats Chris Duncan like she did last time around. And a good indication of where we're at on these legislative and congressional seats is where we're at with the primary results. And I'll talk about those in a minute as well. But over on the Senate side, we've got 2 big protect seats. One is Rosalicia Ochoa-Bogue. She's got the Inland Empire and parts of the desert. She's doing fantastic, working incredibly hard, but about half of that district is new to her. So she's been spending a lot of time in the Palm Springs area, picking up her name ID, making sure she's showing up and really working hard in that area. Then we have Suzette Martinez Valadares. She is running in Senator Scott Wilk's seat. This is a seat where he is termed out. Santa Clarita Valley, Lancaster, Palmdale area, great overlap with Congressman Mike Garcia. So this is a seat that, was really, really tight 4 years ago. Registration has gotten a little bit better for us there, as it has in all of these seats. And the results from the primary, which I'm going to talk about as soon as I talk about our big opportunity for pickup on the Senate side. That pickup is currently held by Josh Newman, but he really carries just a very small portion of this district. If you look at the way this district is drawn, it looks like a dinosaur running downhill. It is like, when you think of a gerrymandered district, like this is what you envision. And he lives in the very top tail of the dinosaur and only represents about 15% of that district. The other overlapping portion, DUI Dave Min, who is Scott Baugh's opponent for that congressional seat, represents the rest of it. So we've got Dr. Stephen Choi in that seat. He's the former mayor of Irvine. That Irvine is the biggest city in that district. He was also an assemblyman for 10 years until he basically got redistricted out of his seat as well. So this is a great opportunity for pickup for us. And I mentioned those results from the primary. In every single one of these districts, except for one, every single protect seat, every single offensive seat, except for one, California Republicans, the Republican Party's aggregate, was above 50% in the primary. And that's really good news for us. So a seat like Suzette Martinez Valadares' seat, it was a 13-point Dem registration advantage. She ended up winning that seat along with another Republican with 56%. So it was a 13-point swing. This is phenomenal for us. So these are the types of things that we'll be looking at. We have been looking at since we did our modeling project. Who do we need to turn out? Who do we need to make sure is with us so that we can get all of these candidates across the finish line? So I'll talk briefly about voter registration, although lately it is my favorite topic to talk about. And that is because we've had so much success on it. I'm going to take you back to February of 2019 when I was first elected. It was a pretty dark time for California Republicans. In fact, we were essentially the third largest party in the state. If declined estates were an organized party, there were more people that were choosing to be declined estate than were choosing to be Republicans. We all knew that we had to roll up our sleeves. We had to get the work done, and we had to go out there. We had to bring our message to communities that might not have heard our message before. We needed to show up. We needed to do some of the fundamentals and the basics. And we also needed to do some of the new technologies. And I'm so glad that we invested in all of those things. We brought back our bounty program. So every single county party is eligible for bounty for our voter registrations. We also did an intense digital program. About half of these voter registrations come from the DMV's motor voter program. So making sure that we're putting in the ads when people are typing that in to their browsers, and that is showing up. Organizing geofencing around DMV centers. This is something that is critical as well. So the work that we've done and the investment that we've made on the digital side as well has been incredibly helpful, but also showing up in those communities that maybe never heard our message before. And fortunately, we have an amazing national committeeman in Sean Steele. And he was the one that really had the vision for our community centers. When I was first elected chair, I would go to farms with Senator Shannon Grove. She and I would both go to farms. And the very first farm I went to was of now Congressman John Duarte's. He wasn't a congressman there. He was just a farmer. And he invited me to come. He has this Friends Day at the farm. And half of it is this business expo, and half of it is a like tri-tip barbecue for all of the farm workers and their friends and families. So he said, Jessica, I want you to come. They've probably never met a Latina who's also a Republican, let alone the head of all the Republicans. Come talk to them. Talk to them about the issues that are important to them. Having a good job to go to. Making sure your streets are safe. Making sure kids have a good education so that they can do better than the generation before. Things that are important to my community. You don't have to shove the Republican thing down their throat, but they'll get it. So I did that, and we'd register people at these, but it's one thing to show up and be there for a day and leave the next. It's a very different thing to have a consistent, permanent type of presence within these communities. And Sean Steele really had the vision for this, and the RNC funded it here in California. The first in the nation was our Little Saigon Community Engagement Center, and this was focused on the API community. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just about launching precinct walks and doing phone banks. We do that too. But we have a Tai Chi class that we offer on Friday nights. We had a Vietnamese dance team that would practice there on Saturday mornings. Sean just sent me a picture of a yoga class that they did last week. We also launched our Republican Civics Initiative, which was modeled after a program that we saw in South Florida, where our team was trained by the Department of State, and they help people prepare for their citizenship exams. We wanted to mirror this all over the state, and we did it in 3 other locations focused on the Latino community. We have one in Congressman Mike Garcia's district, one in Congressman David Valadeo's district, and one in Congressman John Duarte's district. Now, the shift that we've seen with these voter groups in those districts has been phenomenal. Michelle Park-Steele saw a movement of 5 points in her district amongst Asian voters. Mike Garcia saw a movement of 18 points amongst Latinos in his district. And then David Valadeo saw a movement of 16 points amongst Latinos, and he was running against a Latino. It is really critical that we show up and we are there in these communities and we talk about our shared values and what the Republican Party can do for you. And we've really done that. So now, 5.5 years later, we've registered over 775,000 new Republicans to the California Republican Party in that short time period. But what's most interesting is what has taken place since October of last year, so about 11 months that we're talking about. We've had 3 reports that have come out from the Secretary of State in that time. And in that time period, all 3 of the reports showed a gradual trend. California Republicans picked up 197,000 new Republicans since October of last year. In that same time period, Democrats lost 112,000. Decline to states lost 65,000. We picked up Republican registration in every single county in our state, every single assembly district, every single Senate district, and every single congressional district. So every single seat that we won in 2022 is better for us in 2024. That is great news. David Valadeo is a seat that in 2022, it was a D plus 17.5. Now it is a D plus 14.5. We've seen a swing of 3 points in that congressional district alone. So do I feel better about all of those seats that we won in 2022? Absolutely. Do I feel better about the seats that were so incredibly close in 2022 that we now have the opportunity to pick up? Absolutely. And we really couldn't have done that without the work of everyone here. I'm going to talk really quick about ground game and election integrity, because I know those are a couple things that are really important to you women. And then I want to open it up for questions. And as Gretchen mentioned before, if you have a question, please put it in the chat and we'll get to, I will stay here and take as many of those as we can. But ground game, this is something that's critical. You know, when we picked up those 4 seats in 2020, we had about 42,000 volunteers on the ground, knocking on doors, making phone calls, doing the peer-to-peer texting, part of our ballot harvesting program. And on the election integrity side, we had about 60% of all ballots being watched by lawyer staff and volunteers here in California. Fast forward to today, we now have over 89,000 volunteers that are out there working hard to make sure we get our candidates across the finish line. And the largest increase that we have seen is amongst our election integrity volunteers, because this is something that's so critical. And I think we're really fortunate. And I mean, fortunate is one thing to say. We weren't lucky in this. We planned this the way that we did. And in 2020, we were very engaged in election integrity, unlike many other states around the country. So in a seat like Mike Garcia's, who was my congressman at the time, we won that seat by 333 votes. You want to show me a place where bad stuff can happen? I promise you it's in a seat where we win it by 333 votes. And we had lawyer, staff, and volunteers on the ground to make sure no funny business happened. Greg Wallace, 85 votes, landslide Wallace in 2022. John Duarte, 544 votes. We won that seat by in 2022. It was one of the last seats in the nation that were called. These are the places where those election integrity volunteers are critical. We went from having 60% of all of our ballots being watched by lawyers, staff, and volunteers, mostly in those targeted areas, to today we will have 93.5% of all ballots being watched by lawyers, staff, and volunteers. We have an election integrity chair in every single county in our state. We have a lawyer assigned to every single county in our state. We have trained thousands of poll watchers. And one of the cool things that we've done this cycle is we've helped people to become poll workers, to get jobs within their county clerk's offices, counting ballots, working the polls, making sure we have someone on the inside. So if ballots show up at 3 a.m., we know there are eyes on those ballots. So these are some of the critical things that we're working on. Obviously, ballot harvesting on both the passive side and the aggressive side. Our aggressive side is our neighborhood team leader program, which many of you have already signed up to be, and I appreciate you for doing that. And then on the passive side, we are still working with churches. You guys will probably remember in 2020, I got into a little bit of trouble because I put ballot boxes inside of the churches and they tried to take me to, well, they didn't try. We went to court and, some people were telling me I needed to take these ballot boxes in. I was like, no, we are not doing anything illegal. They are not mad because we are breaking the law. They are mad because we are playing by their rules and we're beating them. And we did. We had one church in Young Kim's district in 2020, where we had 11,000 ballots that were collected. This is huge. When you're winning a seat by 1,200 votes, that is absolutely huge, and it makes a difference. Right here in Simi Valley, at St. Rose of Lima, it was probably the most photographed because our pastor, Joe Shea, put the ballot box out in front of the church, and AP just took pictures of it and ran with it. So we are going to continue to ballot harvest. I hate it. I wish that it wasn't the law. I believe that California Democrats have legalized and normalized what would be considered fraud in most parts of the country. But until we win more seats and we change the election laws here in California, we cannot sit on the sidelines. We must do everything that we can. I think I liken it to a football game. We don't have an election day. We have an election month, and we cannot allow the Democrats to run up the score on us for 3 quarters and just show up in that 4th quarter and expect to win. We have to play hard every single quarter, every single minute of that game, and that's what ballot harvesting and early vote does for us. So with that, before I close and take questions, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everything that you have done, but thank you for everything that you will do in this next 50 days on behalf of the California Republican Party. So with that, Gretchen, I'm happy to take some questions from the group.
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman Patterson. We have some questions that Nancy and I are going to trade off asking just so nobody gets bored with us.
Okay.
So I'll take a couple and then Nancy will ask you a couple, okay?
Sounds great.
And then we have a few questions that were submitted earlier today. And we'll see what pops up on the chat.
Okay.
So when you were first elected in 2019, what are the key changes that you've seen since that time that have made the biggest difference?
So I think messaging would probably be at the top of my list. And I wanted to make sure that we were a Republican Party that was finding and including everyone who identified as being a Republican. I'm a big fan of Reagan. As you can see, I've got my Reagan doll here, and you've got a Reagan book up. I live in the shadow of the Reagan Library. And he would say, my 80% friend is not my 20% enemy. And right now, the Democrats, particularly here in California, are giving us the opportunity to make inroads with people who have never heard our message before. And, I joke with a couple of these recent higher profile Democrats that have moved over to the Republican Party. You don't get red pilled overnight. This is something that happens gradually. So I think the messaging is really, really critical. And then, 70% of my time is spent on fundraising. And the reason for that is because while none of this happens by accident, it also doesn't happen without funding. So I spend so much time fundraising to make sure that we are able to pay for all of this stuff. Because nothing's free. If you want to run a grassroots organization that's going to go out and knock doors, you need to have something to leave behind. You need to pay for the data that's required to make those phone calls and knock on doors. Everything costs something. So I would say those are probably the two things that I have focused on the most to be able to have this type of growth and excitement. Finally, I would just say, like, big picture wise, focus. Focus is incredibly important. There is a lot of noise out there. And oftentimes it comes from within. It comes from within our own party. And I don't spend any time on the haters. I focus on, does this help me win elections? If it does not help me win elections, I am not going to be bothered by it. Sometimes it takes a lot of my willpower to get to that place, but focus is incredibly important.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that was submitted earlier by email, and that is redistricting. I know in most of the people that my friends and family that live in California live in places that have been redistricted. I haven't heard as much about it lately. Is the whole state completely redistricted now, or is that still such a big push? Or is it's completely done, the whole state?
So for California, we are done. There are a couple of states that had to go through legal process, some judges, some went back to the legislatures, but California has been done, and we've already had a full election with the redistricted maps. Also with GOP data center, we have a ton of those special districts and local districts that are in there as well. So cities that went from being citywide elections to district elections, we've included those in there, water districts, school boards, that sort of thing. But yes, our redistricting process finished in late 2021. So we are done.
You take it, Nancy, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to give you one. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, great
Nice
to see you,
see
Nancy.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to give one that's in our chat, and this is from Jennifer Farmer, and she's asking, why am I only seeing TV ads for Democrats and none for Republicans? I am not seeing any ads for Trump on TV. Is California just a lost cause or not?
So where does Jennifer live?
North Hollywood.
North Hollywood. Okay. So you'll probably see a lot more coming online from Mike Garcia. Not quite yet, because people aren't quite paying attention. And he's being someone's trying to take him out that is not an incumbent, so has no name ID. So George Whitesides is probably trying to build up his name ID, because his polling's probably saying nobody knows who you are, and a significant amount of people know who Mike Garcia is. So you'll likely see a lot more uptick. You'll also see some from those Orange County seats, because they're all in the LA media market. So you'll see one. I actually just saw one that Club for Growth did for Scott Baugh. So you will be seeing those congressional seats or congressional commercials. You will not see a lot of presidential ones. And the reason for that is because President Trump and Vice President Harris, they're going to be working on 11 states not named California. So your target area will see a lot of the congressional seats. You'll probably see some for Suzette running in that Senate seat. You'll probably see maybe even Rosalía Ochoa Bo, because she is part of the LA media market as well. And I'm trying to think, I think that would probably be it on the legislative side, maybe some for Stephen Choi. But You have to, right now, Democrats have so much money. And in fact, Rob Pyers just put out a tweet on the amount of money that was spent 50 days out from Republicans in 2022 versus the amount of money that's been spent by Democrats in 2024, 50 days out. Those numbers have essentially flipped. And a couple of things that you have to look at in that is also what those war chests look like, right? So the first time around, we were redistricted for 2022. So Mike Garcia lost Simi Valley, but he got a lot of that San Fernando Valley. So he had to build up his name ID in those new parts of his district. And you also have, you know, there is no one that can compete with the amount of money that Kevin McCarthy would raise. And so the numbers are just completely distorted from where they were in 2022. I think he raised something like $800 million. So right now we're flipped from where we were, Democrats versus Republicans, on those congressional districts and how much money has been spent. I think what you'll see over the next several weeks is those super PACs coming in and making up for the spending differential. But great question.
All right, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Which propositions are you most concerned with in this election 2024?
Yeah, so I would say the one that I'm most concerned about is Prop 36, right? We saw what Prop 47 and Prop 57 did to our state 10 years ago and over this last 10 years. And Prop 36, when you have people like Mayor London Breed, who's getting on board with fixing the crime problem that we have here in California, this is something that we need to make sure that we are pushing every single voter out. And I think honestly, it might also be a driver for making sure we get some of these Republicans in some of these tight districts. So Prop 36 would probably be the one that I'm most interested in and most excited about.
Okay, I'm gonna ask what is your suggestion for how we can motivate and encourage young people to get more involved and especially to run for office, to become candidates?
Yeah, so one, I would say engage with them. I think that's number one. I think a lot of people brush off young people, and they are actually one of those areas when we look at the demographics of where registrations. I cannot believe I left this cabinet open. Sorry. What is it? Let's see how messy that cabinet is. I think engaging with them is so critical. When we looked at the demographics of where some of these changes were coming from on voter registration, new registrations at that young age were coming over to us. So this is great news for us. And then making sure that there's resources available to them, especially when we're talking about running for office. And something that we do at the California Republican Party is our California Trailblazers program. You don't have to know how to run for office. We can teach you that. You just have to be willing to step up. So I think that's a great resource as well. But first and foremost, we have to engage with them. We have to make sure that we're talking to them. And that is something that we have been focusing on for the last several years as well.
Okay. And who are you looking at for future candidates, especially like for 2026 with governor and all of the state offices coming up for grabs?
Yeah,
well,
I saw that you guys have Steve Hilton. That is going to be your special guest, I think, next month. He is fantastic, and I think he's thinking about running for governor. I've also heard the sheriff of Riverside, Chad Bianco, is someone who is looking at running. I think both of them are just fantastic people. So, you know, I'm very, very focused on 2024. What we've built over this last 5 years is something that I'm incredibly proud of. And I want to make sure we not only hold on to that, but we build onto it as well. And we can do that this 2024. This is also my last election cycle as chair. So there will be a new chair in place that will be the driving force on that gubernatorial race in 2026.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Um, where does all the money go from our taxes and the grants from the feds and the supposed projects like the, high-speed rail and things like that? There's a lot of money running through this state. And what is your opinion on where it goes?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm not a policy person, I'm a political person, but it does not take a policy expert to see what California Democrats and the bureaucracy up in Sacramento have done with our tax dollars. In fact, Josh Hoover, who is one of those targeted seats that I talked about earlier, he was the driving force behind the homeless audit. And we have $24 billion that we have spent on the homeless crisis, and most of it is unaccounted for. That should worry us all. You mentioned high-speed rail. This is something that was sold to Californians as LA to San Francisco for like $5 billion. And here we are $58 billion later. And gosh, it's got to be like 14 years now. I think it was on the 2010, maybe 2012, but it's been going on forever. We have to know, it does not take a policy person or expert to know that what is happening up in Sacramento is just absolute nonsense. We are throwing money into a black hole, and that's why you can go from nearly $100 billion surplus to a $68 billion deficit in 2 years.
Okay, thank you for that. And what is your opinion on top two?
So I would say that in the beginning, I really understood what they were trying to do. I think, unfortunately, in practice, it was just like I don't think anyone has really benefited from top two. I would be a fan of its repeal. I just don't know if there's anybody out there that's willing to put the money behind a ballot initiative to do that. But I started out as someone who could see where, and it was, very bipartisan and very eclectic group of what seemed to be problem solvers trying to get more done up in Sacramento. And I think that we can all see that it was just it was a failed experiment.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, I got it. Couple questions. Since you're on the last, the end of your term, almost the
Yeah.
end. Are you seeing some viable candidates to replace you? Are you mentoring somebody? I mean, I don't know what you can say or can't say, but
Probably can't.
Well,
yeah,
what I would
but
say
what,
is that, when I ran for this position, I didn't get into the race until January 11th of 2019. My election was February 24th of 2019. So I don't even know that we have the full slate of everybody who's going to be in this race. And so right now, my sole focus is making sure we hold on to what we've picked up and build upon that in November. And I think once we get through November, and I mean all of November, because you guys know we're not done counting ballots until December 5th when they are certified. We are curing ballots that entire month of November. We are making sure our candidates get across the finish line. Sometimes we have to go to court over things in November. We are not done November 5th. I think when everything is said and done, that will give us a really good insight into what we've done, what we've built, what's working, if there's places that we need improvement, and that will help us all make a great decision for what's going to happen with the chairmanship in March of 25.
Do you guys mind if I ask a question? Do you mind, Gretchen, if I ask a question?
You can ask a
who's
question.
speaking? Is that, Janet?
That's
Yes,
Janet.
you can, Madam President.
I don't
Janet,
need
you can ask a question.
But I'm a native Californian,
Yeah.
and it has really always bothered me about how I've seen the state go from lush agriculture and then drive up the state and you see just dead acreage. And so I know that water is a power issue. What can Republicans do to loosen up that grip on power and let the farmers farm as they should get to?
No, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, this is a self-inflicted dust bowl in some of our areas, right? And we get years where we have massive amounts of rain and we watch billions and billions of acre foot go just out into the ocean.
The ocean.
Yeah. And so I think one of the critical things that we have already done in the last 2 cycles is elect farmers to Congress, with both David Valadao, who is a dairy farmer, and Congressman John Duarte, who is also a farmer up in the northern part of the Central Valley. Their voice in this is so critical. And they, you know, they're thinking of new ways to do things, you know, in the times of AI, you know, how can we be more helpful? But those water rights and those water issues, I think it's really important that we elect more people that understands it. And I promise you, no one understands it better than a farmer.
Is the smelt still an endangered species? It is, but it is not helping the smelt.
It's not, and
Not.
there's been so much money that has been invested, and you know, we passed a bond, and nothing has been built as far as water storage. And this is again one of those ways that California Democrats up in Sacramento have just absolutely wasted those taxpayer dollars.
I have another question for you, and it relates to what you just said about all the money wasted and what you said earlier about some of the other money, the homeless money that has been just evaporated. How there's most of us who are involved in these groups and these clubs, we know something about this stuff. We've heard things, we've read things, we pay attention, you know, on to one degree or another. But I saw a survey just not too long ago, just within the last couple of weeks, that talked about how little Democrats know. In particular, this was about how little they know about Kamala Harris's policies. You know, it was like literally like 75 to 90% of the people questioned didn't have a clue about some of the things that she supports or has actually taken action on over, not just like you said, not just the last few years, but in her 20-year history. How can we, it's twofold really. How can we educate not only the low propensity voters, but the Democrats on the information that they're not getting because they don't get it on ABC and CNN and all of that. We get it, but they're not getting it. So how do we reach out to our opposition and educate them? And then what is it going to take to hold Newsom accountable for all of the waste? You know, and I know he's proposing new bonds in the upcoming election that will just duplicate bonds that we didn't vote for, but the majority of people did. So, I mean, that's kind of a twofold question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And I think it's number one, and probably the most effective way that you can make change is by talking to people outside of this group. And you will be surprised that while they may not have the education because they're not getting it from, you know, their news outlets, everyone is feeling the Biden-Harris economy. And I did a panel with a couple of Democrats at USC, and they're like, we haven't educated people on how good the economy is. And I'm like, listen, when they go into the grocery store, that's all the education they need. When everything is more expensive, when they go to the gas station and fill up the gas tank, that's all the education. What you will say to them will not compare to what they are feeling. But sometimes it takes people like us to connect the dots for them, right? How many of you have gone to a Chevron recently where they have those signs with a QR code that says gas prices in California are higher than anywhere else in the nation, find out why here. And it shows you gas taxes in California versus every other state in the nation, right? It's going to take people like us that are helping them to connect the dots. We had Assemblyman Vince Vaughn, who at the same time the gas tax legislation was put forward, he put forward a bill that would pay for all of our roads get them all fixed up, fill all these potholes, and use transportation dollars. Imagine that. Not going out and taxing us again, using the dollars that are already in transportation budget. So we are offering solutions, but the number one thing that you could do is talk to your friends, and not in a combative way, in a way that makes them feel like you care about their problems, because people won't care what you know until they know that you care. And I think that, you know, sometimes as Republicans, and it's hard for us, right? Because we are right on so many of these issues. But we can't, you know, you've gotta approach things with compassion. Because if you turn on that I'm a know-it-all, the people are going to turn you off. So talking to our friends, people outside of these groups with compassion, I think is some of the most effective ways that we can change things and educate people on what's really happening to them.
Thank you. Thank you. You had spoken about the 60% volunteers, and I was just wondering what on the ballot counting side, you know, and you go in and after the election and say there's discrepancies and there's the, you know, all the pink provisional stuff and all of that. How is that system being worked with? Are people allowed to come up behind and actually watch the election? Are we being allowed in to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, so every single county has different sets of rules, and we actually get those well in advance. Krista Pittman, who's also on the call tonight, she actually is also our state election integrity director. So she is the mastermind behind all of this. So we have an election integrity chair for each one of our counties. One of the first things we ask these election integrity chairs is to develop a relationship with their county clerks. And then we do all of the training with them, what is allowed, what is not allowed. And we make sure that they are prepared when they go into these county clerks' offices. In the primary election, that entire month, we had about 197 incident reports that were reported to caelectionintegrity.org. And all 197 of those incident reports were canceled out, meaning that there was a resolution to every single one of them. Was there incompetence? Absolutely. We are talking about government here. Yes, there was definitely incompetence. Was there anything nefarious? There wasn't any case of nefarious doing. And what I will say is that one of the best parts of my job, win or lose after an election, is calling people and thanking them. In the primary, I took our top 25 election integrity volunteers from around the state. Overwhelmingly, they were thanking me for the opportunity, because they were, you know, these are people, you know, they were going to be our next Project Veritas, right? They were going to uncover massive amounts of frauds going on in their county clerks. And overwhelmingly, they said there was nothing nefarious going. And this brought me to a place where I had more confidence in our elections. And I thank them all for that. But I also said, we need to, again, live by Reagan's rules and trust, but verify. And I promise you, if we take our foot off the gas, particularly in these areas where we're winning by less than 100 votes or a few hundred votes, that is the absolute place where Democrats will take the advantage. And we need to make sure that we're showing up and we are protecting our vote. And that's why our election integrity operation is so critical. And Krista just does a phenomenal. When I say that she trains other states around our country, there is not a week that goes by where another state party chair doesn't call me up saying, can I borrow Krista for an hour? She's phenomenal.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We know what you're doing from now until the election, but you have a few months after that that you're going to be free to write cards and thank you people. But what do you have any plans, like you're leaving? What is your to-do list before you walk out that door?
Yeah. So It will not be just until the election, right? Because we've got a month of counting here. So that will take me to December. And then what my job will be over that next couple of months is to make sure that the next chairman is in a good financial position, and to make sure that we are ushering in hopefully new members of Congress, new members of the legislature, new Republicans that have decided to join our party. So that will be my focus. It will be continuing to fundraise to make sure that the next chair is in a strong financial position when they get started, and then making sure that all of the new Republicans elected and registered feel welcome in our party. So that will be my focus.
Good focus. Okay,
Okay.
Very good.
Gretchen, you have anything else?
Well, you know what? We are right up against the clock. I'm going to ask one quick question. You mentioned something a few minutes ago about a Chevron rally, whether they had the
Oh, no,
QRS
it's right at the
code.
gas station. When you pull into Chevrons, there's like, what are those boards called? You know, those boards that are
Like a sandwich board.
yes, a sandwich board. And you can scan the code. I'll have Krista, I took a picture of one the other day when I was at Chevron. So I'll send that over so you guys can see it. And this is, I mean, they're trying to educate people as well. And that's great. These are our friends in the oil industry that are trying to make energy more affordable. And every chance the Democrats get, they make sure that our energy is less affordable. And because we're buying it from our enemies and places that don't care about the climate, it is dirtier than the massive amounts of
Right.
resources that we have here in California.
Okay, thanks. I'll have to check that. I had not seen that, but
I haven't either. No, that's
okay, but
interesting.
that's because I buy my gas at Costco. But I will look for a Chevron. So, Chairwoman, thank you so much for being
It's
with
my
us
pleasure.
tonight. It was so educational, and it was so good to get such a positive take on the upcoming election and the candidates. I'm going to let Janet finish out, but I just wanted to say thank you so much.
My
And thanks to
pleasure.
Krista
Thank you for
for
having
helping
me.
us.
Well,
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you for hosting both Gretchen and you, Nancy. And we're so honored to have you, Madam Chairwoman, tonight. And you've been very educational, but encouraging. I really didn't expect to be as encouraged as I am right now. So that's nice. It was a little gift that I didn't think I'd get.
Well,
But
I'm glad to bring the hope. And I just saw Audrey Voigt pop up in the chat. Hi, Audrey. I didn't see you join us, but thank you for being here tonight too.
yes, and everybody who joined us tonight, we are very grateful. And boy, do we have a lot ahead of us.
50
But
days. Let's do it.
yes, we're going to put our feet to the ground and do it and take it back, both our state and our
Our
country.
Yeah.
So very, very lovely. And Gretchen, you had mentioned before our fundraiser, which will have Steve Hilton on October 18th. So if any of you don't know about it, we will get you an invitation. And Madam Chairwoman, we'd love to invite you too.
Oh, thanks so much.
If you could. So we will get you an invitation.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you all so
Bye,
much.
guys.
Sherry, Kaylee,
Thank
Nancy,
you.
Gretchen, everybody. And God bless us all. Not like Tiny Tim, but it's
Thank
true.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you all.
Bye-bye.
Mhm.
All right. See you all soon. Thank you.
For any of